if you had stayed with the WWF at the time in '97, I mean, I personally think it would have been better if you main evented WrestleMania 14 against Austin. It would have been a great story, and I could just imagine with the way your brain works, if you had that story to tell with Austin coming full circle, that he finally conquers and beats you after the WrestleMania 13 and the Survivor Series '96 match. Did you ever think about what would have been like it, or was there any discussion if you did stay with WWF that you would have wrestled Austin at WrestleMania 14?
I would love to work with Steve. I love working with Steve. We started kind of getting chemistry right away. The Survivor Series, which was a really great match. Whenever I watch it back, I go, "Geez, I forgot how good that match was." It was such a good match. But I always had great matches, Steve, and great working matches. Like when I came back after wrestling Steve, I didn't have, I didn't feel like I got he was a good worker. He was safe to work with. He was a guy that you could go out there and dance all night and have great fun. And I had the chemistry I was getting with Steve was just beginning. And WrestleMania 13 is an example of, I think that Steve started to trust my instincts and sort of understand that I had like I never really looked at wrestlers as like their personalities, like whether I liked them or didn't like them or that so much a factor. It's like to me, it was like I was saying a few minutes ago. It's like writing a song together.
Yeah.
It's like what kind of song are we going to sing? Like what kind of match are we going to have? And I can remember like Steve at WrestleMania 13 was like, I remember standing with him and going, I think this is like a school fight. It's like two guys fighting at school, and I remember like kind of laying out the psychology of the match. And we go, and I remember Steve was on the same page. He was like, he kind of that I was painting, and I think that was always the case with Steve. He started to trust me. I think after WrestleMania 13, I trust Bret Hart to tell me what he thinks works and what he doesn't. If he doesn't like something, then there's a reason why, and he trusted my judgment. And I think Steve and I would have only had better and better matches afterwards. And in fact, when the whole problem with Sean happened, was I said, "Well, I'll drop the belt to Steve Austin instead." I said, "I won't drop the belt to a guy that refused to put me over ever." Like the problem that people still don't seem to understand or quite get what it is was about the screw job was that it was a case of me telling Sean a few weeks before that I had no problem dropping the belt to him and that I'd be happy to do whatever they wanted. And I just wanted him to know that. And then him say to me, well, basically, I just want you to know I would never do the same thing for you ever. And it's like, as soon as he said that to me, it was like, okay, fuck you. I'm never doing it for you either. Like, I take it back. I would never work with a guy that's not a professional and they'll put his ego in front of doing business. Someone that wouldn't feed my family would expect me to feed his. I just never went against the grain of everything that I grew up with in wrestling, and I refused. I said, if Sean doesn't put me over, at least prove to me that he has enough respect for me to put me over. And I'd heard that about Sean before, was that he had said that he wasn't putting anybody over. He was not going to job out to anybody. And I know that Sean had a problem putting Steve over at WrestleMania. And that was the beginning of, I think Sean had all his drug problems back then. And so I go back to a different time period. But for me, I said, I'll be happy to drop the belt I'll drop it tomorrow night. I'll drop it anytime. You can change the card and put me with put me with Steve. Let me drop the belt to Steve. I'd be happy to do that for him. And I would love to have worked with Steve. I would have dropped the belt. I ever told him I would drop the belt to the Brooklyn Brawler in Madison Square Garden because they had a battle royal, which was all, there was so many shady things going on at that time. They were trying to kill me off, and Vince had a hard on for me, like where he was going to ruin me or try to, and he wasn't even hiding it anymore. It was kind of open about it. And it's like, okay, so here you are lying to me about everything and keep playing with, toying with me, and so they had Steve Lombardi win the Battle Royal in Madison Square Garden. And the winner of the Battle Royal gets a title shot the next show at the Garden. And I just remember it's like, really? Like, you're going to pick Steve Lombardi to win you're not going to put me with, there's so many wrestlers they could have put me with that, no offense to Steve, but he was not a top guy at the time, maybe ever. But I mean, it was like, I just was like, Madison Square Garden, you're going to put me with Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler, in Madison Square Garden, main event, world title match. And that was coming up after the Survivor Series. And I remember saying, I'll drop the belt to him. Right there. So I don't have a problem losing the belt. Because that's not the point. I have a point with a guy that doesn't want to do business with me, saying that, you're going to lose to me, and that's the way it is. And that was the problem with Sean. But getting back to your point, there's a lot of guys I wished I could have worked with. Steve Austin would have been one. Dwayne Johnson would have been another. I mean, I would have loved to have worked with Dwayne. I only worked with him one night, Monday Night Raw, and it was a good match. Like, Dwayne was a really, really skilled wrestler. I mean, I always had a lot of respect for him. And Undertaker, I would love to have worked with him a few more times. There's a lot of great things and great wrestlers that I didn't get to work with because I left the company. And I wish, in hindsight today, mostly because when I think of what Goldberg did to me with kicking me in the head, that I wished I'd been in WWE or WWF the whole time and never left, and that we'd ironed out whatever the issues were, and that I'd stayed there because I was comfortable in their rings. A big reason I got hurt, I think, was when Goldberg threw me in the ropes. Coming off the rings are 16-foot rings. They were, the WWE ones are 20-foot rings. That extra 4 feet makes a huge difference. I came off the ropes so fast, and Goldberg standing in the middle of the ring, and he kicked me as hard as he could in the head. And if it had been a WWE ring, I would have been coming off the ropes, and would have had a few more steps before that big foot came up and kicked me. And I think I would have been a whole different thing. My career would have been much better if I had stayed there. And the fact that Vince was, in a lot of ways, was a genius with his booking. And the things I could have done and the guys I could have worked with, in contrast to going to WCW, where Eric Bischoff never had a clue what he was doing. And Hulk Hogan was calling all the shots for everybody and killing everybody off. And it's just too bad that it went the way it did. In hindsight today, I wish I could have changed things.